Welcome to another episode of Design Meetup, powered by IxDF Kerala and co-sponsored by Experion Technologies. Apply insights gleaned from behavioral design and persuasion research to your design process to create a massive impact on user experience, improve engagement, and persuade users to take action. Our speaker, Yash Arun Chheda, a UX specialist, will be taking us through persuasive design to guide user choice, a guide to better design. To talk about the speaker today, he has over 6 years of work experience. He started out in digital marketing in the hospitality industry and has a keen interest in human psychology. He is currently working as a UX specialist in IT services. He has worked in different states across India, including Kerala. When I asked Yash what brought him to UX, he said working in marketing is a lot of work he was doing, was crafting content, gathering data on customers, but all this data was not being used. He felt that this could be applied to improve the product or service. He wanted to work in design to get into crafting products that can impact people. Yash is from Mumbai and currently based at Bangalore. Apart from human psychology, he loves traveling and also loves doing handwriting analysis. His favorite quote is, "There's a sunrise and a sunset every single day, and they're absolutely free. Do not miss so many of them." For the ease of a better experience, we have muted the audience mic during the session. Please put in your questions in the chat window, although we will be having an exclusive Q&A session just after the webinar, where the audience can interact and discuss. A recorded version of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. For those of you just joining us, welcome to Persuasive Design to Guide User Choice, a guide to better design. Over to you, Yash.
Oh, thank you, Pinju. Thank you for the really good, cool introduction. Jumping into it, this talk is an extended introduction to behavioral design. What I'll speak about is you will get a clear idea of what it is, how you can use it in your professional life as designers to influence your users, to guide their choices and shape their behaviors. And also where you can go to learn more of it. Personally, why this topic is so fascinating to me is in our day-to-day lives, all our interactions with people, the majority of all our communication behaviors, it all aims at influencing other people. But at the same time, we are not certain of the underlying principles or the psychological principles which drive these behaviors. How do you influence other people's minds? How do you influence their behaviors? How do you change your own habits and help others to change their own? How do you help others make better decisions? These are all things which are covered by this field of this behavioral design. So just let me quickly walk you through an example that everyone will be, most of you might be able to relate to. Swiggy and Zomato are food ordering apps that are widely popular in India. So just if you take a look at these screens, these are the checkout flows. Whenever you order food and when you go to checkout, this is what shows up. And I'd like to focus your attention on here, on the tipping aspect of it. See, you see, even though the apps are so similar, they take very different approaches to design. Zomato plays to our psychological need to give or to create value. The language they use also is support your rider. And this is during COVID. This is the screens they were using. And they've also given a few options for tips. Swiggy, on the other hand, is a little bit more sophisticated in terms of UX design. And I'll show you why. You see, not only do they have few default options, but they also have another option where, let's say someone has a big order or they're feeling very generous, they can actually tip a very much larger amount apart from these, while you don't have that option in Zomato. At the same time, they've also given a default option of most tipped, which kind of anchors us to tip that amount. And we will be tipping relative to that. We'll go more deeper into it a bit later on. Let's talk about what is behavioral design. So this is the definition. Behavioral design is the application of these sciences and a lot of research over the last 40, 50 years on how human behavior can be molded, influenced, and changed. So it is a systematic understanding of how people think and how they make decisions. And this understanding forms the basis about designing interventions that lead to guiding user behavior. What we do as behavioral designers is we combine psychology, design, technology, as well as creative methods to find out why people do the things they do and figure out, using experimentation, using different approaches, using these principles that we learn about, on how to activate them to change their behavior. Related to behavioral design is persuasive technology. So this comes from Stanford researcher and professor, B.J. Fogg. And we use these behavioral principles to actually design or influence the design of digital products. Our smartphones, apps we use, websites, they all essentially come under persuasive technology. So what we are trying to do with persuasive technology is we are trying to change attitudes and behaviors of users through persuasion, through influence, but not through force. So most current persuasive research, technology research, focuses on these interactive devices, desktop computers, services, apps, mostly digital. I think since we are all designers working primarily with digital products, this is what I'll focus on this talk also. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, these are all built on the basis of persuasive technology. And it is specifically that technology has been created to change their users' opinions, attitudes, and behaviors to meet product goals. So, but what is the difference? And this is the next question is, what is the difference between persuasive technology or behavioral design and just normal psychology? Psychology usually has an aspect of behavior, but psychology also involves thoughts, feelings, our perceptions, how we see the world around us, how we think, and of course, how these things influence our behavior. While we as designers are completely focused, and behavioral science also, on observable responses to stimulus. So if I create X stimulus, it will lead to some other probably measurable behavior. In digital products, we can also use analytics to track these measurable behaviors. So behavioral, as a UX designer or a UI designer, or generally, what can you do with it? See, when you use a product or a service, users have certain goals in mind. But users are also very fickle-minded. Our feelings, perceptions, thoughts keep changing all the time, even though our goals might not. So that is where you come in, and our job is to make it easy for the user to reach their goals with that product or service. So the core of it is what are the behavioral principles we can use? And these are some common behavioral principles that you'll come across in digital products. And I'll walk you through them. Of course, there are many more, but these are the common ones you'll be able to relate to, and you'll come across again and again in multiple products and services. We'll start with the halo effect. If you look at this picture, why do we have this thing? Let's say you run into a celebrity in your favorite mall. Your first tendency, if not you, but a lot of people will want to click selfies with it. But why is that? What do you do with the selfie? You post it on your social media, you share it on your family WhatsApp groups, you send it to your best friend, look who I met. So this The halo effect speaks about where uh, one trait of a person or a thing that kind of rubs off on you by association. If I am clicking a picture with Salman Khan, part of his persona, his fame, it kind of it rubs off on my and improves my social standing. That is the underlying principle of that behavior, even though that is not how we think of it. So, and coming to the technical definition, the halo effect is when one trait of a person or a thing, be it whatever, is used to make a judgment of that person or thing. And what it does, it is one of the mental heuristics we use. A heuristic, uh, it allows us to make rapid decisions, and the decisions may be biased, but still, it's like a shortcut that our brain uses to make certain decisions. And the halo effect can work in both positive and negative directions. If you like one aspect of something, you will have a positive tendency towards it. If you dislike one aspect of something, that will also affect it. How does it affect your product? So I want you to take a look at the previous screen that BBC News had versus their existing one. On the left-hand side is the old screen where you can see the text is a bit difficult to read because of the color combination. Everything, the icons, the text, it is all kind of jumbled together, the ads. So it's a bit confusing. So when you're trying to consume information, it makes it that much more difficult. While on the right-hand side, if you look at the BBC screen, you can see that there is a clear heading, BBC. There is a tagline. You know what subpart of BBC you are in, which is the science and environment section. You can see the title and who's been written by, as well as the text, which is very well organized. And if you want to look further, there is further navigation on the right-hand side. So what happens is, if your design or if your usability of your product or service or website is difficult, users will tend to have a negative outlook towards it. So they will expect negative things in the future with it. This is another example of a simple sign-up form. Now you can see the left-hand form is very, like you can see clearly, everything is very readable, very usable, and it is very accessible. If you look at the one on the right, it looks like the colors are muted, the soft shades, the palettes, they look amazing. But the issue is, it is very aesthetic, but at the cost of accessibility. This is another example. So where does the halo effect come in the design process? So where is the very first time a user will interact with your product? That is when they sign up for it. So if you make the sign up flow very usable, very easily accessible, make it as easy for them to sign up as possible, you will find that the users will have a positive impression, which will carry over to all their later interactions with your product. Another aspect is the visual design. So you can make a product very, as you saw before, very accessible. The UX can be very good, but visually, if it is not pleasing, if the interface is ugly, users will tend to have a negative impression of it. And so that is why the visual, and when the visual design is made very, very beautiful, it will have a positive effect, the halo effect. It will kind of affect their perceptions of it across other things. This is another example. Again, this is the Swiggy app, which is a food delivery app. So I have to make a choice between these two restaurants. Now I am new to the city. I don't know anything about it. So what is the first thing that a user will look at? They will look at the ratings. Okay, but you can see there's something else which actually subtle is they have also talked about how many people have ordered from that restaurant. Even though Chili's restaurant, which is the first one, might have a little bit of lower rating, not by much, but I will see that almost 1/3, 50% more people have ordered from it. That means it's that much more popular. And I will have a tendency to actually order from that restaurant. These are all things where one aspect, if other people like it, that means it is good. These are some ways where the halo effect takes place. Now we'll move to the next one. That is the peak end rule. So people generally judge an experience on how they felt at its peak and its end, not the entire experience. The best example of that I can give you is, think of your favorite stand-up comic. Let's say he had an amazing set for half an hour, he had amazing jokes, but he was not able to end it properly. The last joke kind of fell flat. And then people, as they are leaving from or you switch off your computer and the video, people will remember how it ended, not how it progressed throughout. And that is where we have, and it is another heuristic, another mental default, a shortcut that we use, that we will remember the peaks of experiences. We will remember the ends of experiences. And this is how users will also experience your product or service. So in UX, how does it work? Small changes have a large effect on people's recall of your product. When designing interfaces and experiences, you want to pay attention to the most intense points of a typical user journey and the final moments. Let's see. So this is an example of of a well-designed experience where there is a peak and the experience ends on a high end. This is an example where while the user experiences a peak during the course of that journey, but it does not end on a high note because maybe they got confused, the usability was a bit difficult, some error came up. But after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, when asked about their perceptions, they will remember the end. And they say, no, it's not a good experience or not. So this all matters a lot. Now, this is Duolingo. Duolingo is a learning app. It's a language learning app, which essentially tries to use data and tries to gamify the whole process of learning a language. So here's what they do. So as you're going through the whole, like a small subsection of the course, so when you answer 10 questions, that is where a peak, it is achievement. That is where they try to create a memorable experience or a positive experience and to play on that peak. And you want to do the same when designing experiences for others. Now, this is TurboTax. TurboTax allows you to file income tax filings. And it is a very, very complex process, finance, very difficult. It's very frustrating for people. But once you end it, this is how they let you enjoy that, savor that moment. And what you will remember is, yes, TurboTax helped me fill that filings. It made it easy for me. And it kind of plays on that peak also. So next we will talk about others. Price anchoring is a very, very important one. And it is used a lot in e-commerce. So what is anchoring? In general, anchoring is people's tendency to focus on a single initial piece of information, which influences how they make sense of value, of what that value of that thing is, and make decisions on it. And what happens with price is when you are trying to sell something, one very common example is sales. They show that something is, let's say, 1,000 rupees. Let's say there's an Amazon sale going on right now. And they show that there is 30% off and price is 700 now. So what we as users or buyers or consumers tend to do is we will focus on that initial piece of information is we have already anchored that product to a price tag of 1,000 rupees. And all the subsequent decisions we make on what value of that product is essentially plays off that pricing. I will walk you through a couple of experiences which talk about it. This is MailChimp. MailChimp is essentially, it is a email service, like allows you to make email lists and send automated email campaigns, etc. So here it's a very strange kind of thing where they have kept a tiered list of products at different price points. You can see the second, third, and fourth one, they come in like a certain range, while the first one is completely out of the charts. It's like more than almost 15 times the price of the next tiered option. So why they've done that is they know very few people will opt for option one. Most of the use cases, most of their bulk of their customers will be from here. What this does is it allows them to push this high tier number two, which is the most expensive of the second, third, and fourth one. But what we will judge it as, we will tend to compare it with the highest price point and assume that, oh, we are getting a deal. This can be done, this kind of price anchoring can be done in other ways also. Again, I will come back to the option of Swiggy. So when let's say you want to tip your delivery partner. So my natural tendency would be to go for the lowest option, 20. So what they've done is to kind of nudge users towards paying a bit higher tip. They have shown a most tipped option. Now what they've done is it anchors my mind. Oh, most people pay 30 rupees. Should I tip that amount or maybe lower? And we will kind of try, it anchors that price point in our minds and we'll play off that. We move on to the next one, which is negativity bias. I'll start off with a story. So when I was little, I remember this experience where I was with my mother home alone, and it was a holiday. And I was being a good boy. I was playing with my toys the whole day. I was like drawing. I was, while my mom was on the phone, she was working. She was doing her own things. But she didn't say anything. While I was being very, very well behaved. Suddenly, out of mischief, I threw my toy across the room and smashed against a wall and broke. That is when my mom shouted at me. So what it says about us is humans have a natural tendency to pay attention to negative experiences. We give more weight to negative experiences compared to neutral or positive ones. Even when you look at, even the negative experiences might be small. It might not really be that much of effect, but we will still tend to focus on those. If you remember, news also kind of play on that, where negative news tend to move people to action more than positive ones. And our users are the same. Our users will have a tendency to identify flaws in our design. And over last 20, 30 years, there has been something very strange happening in the UX world. Is the usability of websites is getting better, their visual design is getting better. But according to studies carried out, people's satisfaction with websites has not improved by much. So you understand there is a point with positive experiences, positive UX of diminishing returns. So once you get to a certain point, with optimizing your UX, your flows, you also have to start paying attention to the negative aspects of your design if there is something you have overlooked. Why this is important is when you are working on projects in real time, you will have limited time, limited resources. And humans have a tendency, and designers especially, creative people have a tendency to get into perfectionism. So you will be trying to optimize visual design, other things, but sometimes we will do it at the cost of focusing on negative experiences like error messages, like breaks in usability. So once a design is good enough, once the visuals are good enough, you should switch your attention to these error issues, these negative issues like flows, negative user experiences that potentially users might have. So this is a very good example of this. Now, when you're trying to buy something on Amazon and you are not able to, something happens in the server or you click the wrong link, they show a picture of a dog and they try to make it a little bit more funny to kind of attenuate, to kind of reduce the impact of the error message, the frustration that the user will feel. This is very important when designing products, that you want to focus on these, be very mindful of these negative experiences also along with the positive units. Okay, the next principle is called choice paradox. It's a very simple thing. When you present people with, or users with too many options of anything, and so what it does, it increases their cognitive load. They have to process more information to take a decision. And sometimes, and a lot of times, in fact, they will take the decision of not buying anything at all, of not making a choice, which is also choice. So you will find that in most products, in most these kind of digital products, in enterprise products, there will be only 3 or 4 options. Because they have over data, over many 10 decades, we have realized that if you give too many options, people have more difficulty making a decision and they just tend not to buy. And if you present them with simple decisions, if you present them with well-organized information, like the tiered price points, what are exactly what you will be getting in one tire compared to the one option compared to other, makes it easier for them to make a decision. And they'll appreciate them, they'll tend to make a decision much faster. So this is a screen of AliExpress. Here you can see there's too many options, too many choices. We as designers often think that giving more choices is often better, but sometimes it leads to overwhelm. It leads a lot of cognitive overload. And you can see, and you can contrast this AliExpress screen to an Amazon screen. See, Amazon has a large amount of products across pretty much everything. So when they try to help you compare different products, they try to make it as easy for you as possible. First of all, they've given you only the most popular products. The products are personalized to your browsing history and purchase history. And they give you whatever information you need, not only price, but the ratings and other aspects you will need to make a decision. So this is very important when designing product e-commerce, especially during e-commerce, as you want to present limited options to make it as easy as possible for the user to reduce their cognitive load and make a decision. The next one is the Oceankina effect. It is a very, very interesting topic. So what happens is, if humans have a psychological tendency that if you are doing something and you are being interrupted in the middle of it, you will have a very high tendency, it will always be in the back of your mind, and you will want to come back to it and finish the job that is pending. We humans don't like having open mental loops. We don't want these thoughts going on of pending tasks, and we try to finish off as much as possible. I remember about when I was in college, I had gotten into the habit of watching anime, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, not everyone. So what separates good shows from popular shows is they understand how this thing works. When one episode gets over, they design the storytelling, they design the flows such that we will be compulsively want to watch the next show. So, and as soon as one is over, you can't wait to see the next one. It's the same thing you can use in the UX process. So when someone is registering for the first time, you can either have a checklist like this. So what it does is, you can, if you have unfinished tasks, you will have a compulsive tendency to come back and actually finish those. Now, when you design these checklists, you want to make sure that you are doing it for the user's best decision, user's best interest. Same thing can be done using progress bars. So here is an example of where it's a combination of a checklist as well as progress bar. So users might have a tendency to drop off after maybe some of it. But you can see there's a 50% progress, you will have a tendency to come back and finish, get the job done. And this is how you can nudge users towards completing certain flows, which are important in your product. Now, This is, we spoke about these principles, the common ones, but what is the benefit of it? See, for the users, the benefits will be primarily the user experience will be much better. When you choose the right default options, if you present them with choices where they don't have to think a lot in making decisions, it will reduce their cognitive load. They will make faster choices. Let's say you are trying to help them understand a new product or a service properly. Having these checklists, using these principles, they will gain faster understanding of what the product will help them make decisions better. These are all things which actually are with the user's best interests in mind. What are the benefits to designers now? For designers, what we are trying to do is we are trying to drive measurable metrics. We are trying to get them to take actions which we can observe, which we can measure, and which we can show to our executive, to our management. So the benefit is users will be more engaged. They will come back to your product much more. They'll finish tasks which are pending instead of dropping off. Their onboarding when they sign up for the first time will be better for them. It will make it easier, and it will increase revenue also. See, the benefit of good user experience of using these things is when the user experience improves, when they get a lot of value from your product or from your website, it will generally increase the tendency of them to use the product also and to buy from yours. Quickly, now we'll move on to something called as dark patterns. This is something which draws a lot of interest. So what are dark patterns? So dark pattern is essentially where, you can use these behavioral principles to manipulate people also. So when there are certain design elements, when there are certain flows, certain ways of presenting information, they're done in manipulative ways to get users to take actions in a certain manner, where they don't have clarity of it. But we are taking advantage of these cognitive biases or lack of information on their part. These design patterns are called as dark patterns. I'll quickly walk you through, because it's a very deep topic, and walk you through a few examples of it. So dark patterns, essentially, you are trying to trick users into taking certain action. So one of the dark patterns, and there are many ways to do it, is slot machines. In casinos, slot machines actually, you can never win with slot machines. So for every 100 rupees put in, 97 rupees are paid back to the users of these slot machines. But the casino keeps the 3%, which is not a lot. But these are essentially designed to be manipulated. So what they do is they use something called as a recurring reinforcement schedule. So what they do is they have a lot of data on how users, at what point you will, if I don't give you a payback, if you don't win, at what point users will tend to jump out or stop using the slot machine. And they will give you a reward at the exact moment where you will tend to drop out, so that you keep using the slot machine more. Why is this important? I'll come to it next. So this is what social media apps such as Instagram also do. They use a variable, intermittent, recurring reinforcement schedule. So you will notice something very strange. I want you to pay attention. So when you get notifications on Instagram, when you make a new post, so Instagram, sometimes it will give you a notification, or if someone likes or someone responds or comments, but sometimes it will not. The reason it does is to keep you a little bit out of, maybe add a bit of a surprise element, but you will have a tendency to open the app and use it to check, okay, do I have and we don't even realize this behavior. This is an example of a dark pattern. It might not always be very manipulative, but it is like in that gray area. This is Softpedia. It allows you to download a lot of apps and softwares. So what they do is, one of their revenue models is from display advertising. They get paid when users or visitors click on their ads. What they do is, when I'm trying to download something, the actual download link is on the left hand bar. But they actually, what they do is they highlight this ad, which looks like a download bar. And a lot of users who might not know better, who have not used it before, will tend to click on it instead of this, which actually gets them paid for advertising. So this is where ethics also comes into the picture. When you have dark patterns, is whether you use it for positive influences on users to increase the value they are getting from your product, or you are manipulating them to meet your own benefit for your own needs. It's a very thin line. So our job is to essentially influence their behaviors, nudge them, but ultimately to improve their user experience. So what do you do when you are faced with these options? How do you know what you are doing? So the first option is to use the golden rule. The golden rule is treat others as you would want to be treated. Would you want to be manipulated in that? Like, say you are faced with a choice where you are using a pattern which is in this gray area. And the ethics you have to know is, would I want to be manipulated? Would I want to be influenced in that way? And is it in my best interest? If not, then you don't do it for others also, for your users. Second thing is something more, if you want something which is more specific, is, let's say you are presenting a few options to the user, you're nudging them towards a certain action. If the users had all the time, all the energy, they had the right information, will they still take the decision that you are nudging them towards? If yes, then you can go ahead with it. So to round up, we spoke about a lot of things. We spoke about what behavioral design is, what technology is, persuasive technology, what are the goals with it. We went through a few common principles, also the benefits of it, both for the users and for us, dark patterns and the ethics of it. Now, if you want to go a little bit deeper, this is a very deep topic. This is only a very short information. If you want to go a little bit deeper, there are a few different resources that I've shared here. And we'll be sharing this again with you. These are even more books that you can use to learn. And yeah, so again, this is, if you want to dive deeper, I would recommend you go deeper into these resources, dig deep. There's a lot of information. And I hope you got a lot of benefit from this talk. I had a lot of fun. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Yash. Thank you for taking the time to bring us this very interesting session. As a UX designer, I know that I've definitely gained a lot of knowledge. There are so many things, and I believe that it was not even enough time to cover this very vast topic. But without realizing, maybe many of these terms might not be familiar to us. But when you explain them, it's very evident that we know what is happening, even as users directly when we use these products. Maybe as designers, it's time to think about when we have users of a very young age group, and when we use dark patterns, whether it's right, whether it's ethical, and probably we should have conversations about these topics. So let's move on to the Q&A session. We're actually going to enable, so thank you. We've actually enabled you to unmute yourself. So feel free to ask your questions. You can just raise your hand, you can call your name, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can type in the chat window. So we had one question, that Daniel asked, I think before you even got to the dark pattern, but I'm just going to say the question because probably this is something that is very interesting to all of us, especially if we watched, docu-series or movies that are related to social media and how it's affecting our, mental health and how we behave and the time that we give to social media on a daily basis. So our dark usability patterns thought to be under persuasive technology and an example of it. So you spoke about some examples. You also included it in this topic. So the answer is yes, but I'll give it over to you, Yash. This is a question from Daniel. So maybe another example.
So you have to understand that these social media companies and their incentive essentially of a company is to make a profit, which is fine. But what happens is they have these teams of data analysts, they have these teams of designers, behavioral scientists, PhDs. They are all designed with one aim in mind. Because see, you are not paying for Instagram, you're not paying for Facebook. So whenever you are using a product which is free, then you have to understand that you are the product, that the data on you is the product and how much you use it, and the advertising is the product. And that is how they generate revenue of it. So these companies have a lot of incentive to make you use those services as much as possible. And they will do whatever they can to do it, which is not wrong because you are voluntarily choosing to use them. But when it comes to certain user groups, such as children, such as older people, people who might not have very sophisticated, who will not be very educated or sophisticated about these things, who may not be familiar with it. At that point, you have to be much more mindful of how you are designing for them and what consequences it might have, not only on those users, but on society as a whole over a larger period of time. And again, it's like a very vast topic. We can spend like an hour just speaking about it, or like a few hours. But I'm happy to answer on this again. If you can DM me, you can contact me. We can have like a much deeper discussion.
Yeah, just to add to that, Yash, hey, it's Yadu. I work as a lead UX designer. So just to add to what Yash has been saying, I had a personal experience in a game which is in iOS. It's called Sniper Champ. So it's a very interesting game. It's you can shoot at the target and there is wind coming and the position change. It's very interesting. So as you go through, progress through the game at different levels, you get weapon and other accessory add-ons. But there was a situation in which they showed me a prompt, and it said claim INR 300. So I closed the pop-up initially, and then they tried to show it as you are getting a reward, something like that. So I thought it is the virtual money that you can add to the game's cart and then purchase weapons. So I thought it's not real money, it's this virtual money that you get added to your account, and with that money you can purchase weapons. But what actually happened was, as soon as I clicked on that, it took me to the payment page. But I got to know, like, you will lose money if you do that. They're actually asking for money. So sometimes there can be situations that some people doesn't understand. They would think that they are trying to reward you something and add this to your bank account or something, right? So there can be an issue like that when the users are not so sophisticated about the knowledge of this, and there can be a confusion regarding this, and this is very unethical too.
Yes, it's true.
Just adding that.
Thank you so much, Yash, and thank you so much, Yadu, for adding to that point. Daniel's question was, how do we stop this? I think that's a very broad discussion. I'm not sure if we're equipped. Maybe it's something that we can talk on our offline, other online clubhouse sessions, or something that we can take up on Interaction Design Foundation on our discussion thread. Anything that comes free, you must understand that as a user, we become the product. There, maybe it's time for us to educate our users as UX designers, what happens when you're using a free service and how willing you are to put yourself out there, how you should limit probably revealing private information and limit your time. And, from time to time, think about the time that you're giving to social media or anything that is online, especially if that's taking away time from the important things in life. So thank you, Daniel, for that question. A very important discussion that probably as designers we need to have in detail. So I would like to request, I think we have a lot of students or people who are new to UX design. So would love to hear from all of you, what you thought about the session, or if you have any questions. Meanwhile, Yash, I have a question for you. So we spoke about a lot of concepts, but how do you really incorporate behavioral design as a UX designer in your UX design process?
Yes. So speaking from like a higher level view, career-wise in India, there is still not a lot of scope in terms of only behavioral design positions or approaches. But what you can do is slowly start to, let's say you are designing a new flow, and so you can start to apply these things, let's say the checklists or the progress bar into that flow. If you want them to, buy a certain thing, you can use the price anchoring in a certain manner to kind of anchor the price at a higher. So you can do the small things. And what happens is slowly you will start to integrate these principles. And it starts with being aware of them. So once you are aware of them, you start seeing them everywhere. And the simplest way to do it, because UX design is changing so fast right now, and these ways, these principles are used in products, different interactions. You want to just look at as many of these examples as possible of each one, see how they're applied in different contexts, different ways, on websites, on apps, on different types of devices. And you start to observe them, you will get a better sense of how you can incorporate them into your own. There's no straightforward approach to it. It's a lot of it is trial and error. You want to experiment a lot, and you want to use data. Like when you test out experiments, you do A/B testing, and when you get some data where one thing works better than the other, you want to make sure you use the other one.
Thank you so much, Yash. So I think it's something that we don't really think of, while probably we know about these concepts, but probably bringing it as a regular practice. And, when we work in teams, to also educate our, teammates and talk about it so that we're actually more effective, in getting our users hooked to our designs, probably. Yeah. So is there any questions? I'd like to hear from anyone in the audience, who's new to UX and how you found the session. But meanwhile, I'll just take this comment from Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, for keeping the chat window active. So what he's asking is, so like you have booking.com, it's a new travel website. And the downside is they're using dark patterns. And as UX designers, we know that, but other users would probably not be able to recognize it. So isn't it, in terms of the benefits seem to outweigh the downsides of the business? Isn't it idealistic that one should be able to avoid them? I will add my comment to this. We use Google on a daily basis to the extent that we've forgotten what the dictionary is. We've forgotten what an encyclopedia is, and we've forgotten what our brain is actually here, to think and discuss and talk. So when we are so hooked to these, applications and websites and, anything, is it easy for us to now just completely avoid it? So Yash, would you like to add comments? I'll repeat the questions. So the benefits seem to greatly outweigh, that is the dark patterns, outweigh the downsides for the business. Isn't it idealistic that we should be the only one, to avoid them? So shouldn't we use dark patterns?
It's again, it comes down to It's not just ethics also. I don't know the specifics of booking.com's dark patterns, so I can't really speak on that. But generally, it's like you can play off good versus evil, right? Other people, evil people will do what they will. So question is, do you want to be one of those, or do you have some responsibilities as a designer especially when you're designing products that will be used by hundreds or thousands of tens of thousands of even millions of people? Do you want that on your karma, or can you honestly you may be able to get away with it, but do you want to do that? And again, since our job at the core of it as designers is to improve the user experience, to improve the experience of the user, not to sell them things. I mean, the business goals are also an important part of it, but the user goals, the user needs which we are serving, as in we are there in service of the user, we are designing better things to serve the user. That should always be in the back of your mind, doing that. As for other people taking advantage of it, that is why awareness is very important. Right now, it's users, as designers, you are aware of it, but because of the highlights of the dangers of social media, of cell phone addiction, now that people are speaking about it, there are documentaries being made about it, awareness is being raised. So now, then if people still choose to do that, then it is fine. It is a choice they are making, but it's a choice they are making out of information and knowledge, or they are able to take appropriate decisions to limit the use of social media, or to not use a certain company or a product or service which you feel are behaving unethically. But it should not come from a place of ignorance. But so that is why it is important to have these sort of talks. And again, it is a very, very complex topic, because right now we are at a point, especially after COVID and everything, is everything is digital, everything is scalable. One product is being used by millions and billions of people, in fact. So these are things that and regulation is also not the answer, because it will limit the creativity and innovation also. So there has to be a balancing act between all these things. And I don't know the answer. This is something which I can also not comment on. I can only share my thoughts on it.
Yeah, Yash, I'm talking about regulation, which is a very interesting point that you brought there, in terms of the policymakers who are involved, in bringing these regulations, whether they have enough information, whether we have spent enough time to know what exactly are the real bad effects of, these patterns and things that we do, where we are crossing a line, but it's not defined, crossing a line with the users. And do these policymakers really understand on a global level in other countries, in India, do we really understand? And what the long-term effects are of these things, these principles, or unethical, but when they're legal, unethical legal practices,
yeah.
Probably. So I see a lot of new names. We have, thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Arya. Arya, do you want to ask a question, Arya? Would you like to unmute yourself? And okay, so the question is, Arya, if you're able to unmute, please do. I'm just going to read your question.
Yes, hi. First of all, thank you so much for bringing this information to us. I'm attending such session for the first time, and it was really informative. I am an aspiring UX designer. I attended some courses and I'm doing my first case studies. So after getting to know about this information, I was wondering if these companies also ask designers to, practice maybe in a way to do some dark patterns. If so, how do we deal with that?
Okay. Thank you, Arya. It's a very, very good question.
I don't know whether this question makes sense, but since I'm new to this, so
it makes sense. You will probably it might come across that you are working for a client, or you are working where they might ask for, or you might notice that either consciously or unconsciously they are using these sort of things. As to what you can do with it is also a very complex topic. You would have to balance your own needs, your own career goals. You would also have to balance the business requirements that are there. Let's say you are in a highly competitive environment, or a product or a service where everyone else is doing it, and if you don't do it, your company will not remain. I think your product will not be successful. So these are all things that have to be weighed. I think generally, if you're just starting out, it is not something you should worry about too much, because it will take away from the other skills and other things you can learn. Definitely, as you grow, as you move ahead in your career, these things might become more apparent as you are given more responsibility, as you have to take these decisions that will affect users. But I think as an early stage, you might come across it, and always see you can always refuse to do something by giving your reasons. It might not be ideal, but in the beginning stages, it's not at the lower levels of being an associate or being a designer. It's not something you should worry about too much. Definitely, as you progress in your career, you will get a sense of your own morals, your own ethics, and you will also balance it with your own career goals as a designer. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but it is something that you have to be aware of, but you should not let it bother you too much.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I mean, you should not be up in the night wondering, what I should do as a designer. Thank you so much, Yash, and thank you, Arya, for asking that. So we have Daniel also adding to it, saying that basically, it definitely comes down to capitalism, and businesses have to make money, and we are not really the final decision makers. And what Yadu is adding to it, as UX designers, one thing we can do about is not practice it. So the thing is, we can take a decision, but I would say talking about it is one solution. Talking about it to users like your father, your mother, children, or anyone you meet, having these conversations and creating awareness is something that you can do freely, right? And you have the freedom to talk. We are in India. You can talk about it. You can write about it. You can initiate discussions about it. And maybe, you never know, slowly there may be a change. So that's something for all of us in the audience to think about. Do you agree, Yash?
I do. Yes.
And Vandana, by saying not practice it, what I mean is basically, as UX designers, when we do stuff, we have to understand these are dark patterns, and we have to, we should be able to differentiate between good and bad practices, and ethical and unethical ones, right? So like that, we can practice, and with the stakeholders and product managers, if there is a room for a discussion, like if this is not very ethical, this is unethical, if there is a room and that situation is something that is supportive, then you can always initiate that conversation within the team as well. Like I agree to the point of educating the users, and still if there is a room for discussion between the product managers and stakeholders, then that is something that we can also do.
Yes. I mean, talking about it or, bringing it up for discussion, why we should not do it does not mean you lose your job. Or it's absolutely fine. And if there's a collective decision and you are still not able to do it, then probably we should, and raising awareness. Yes, Daniel. That's something that that anyone can do it, right? You don't need to be a UX designer to bring awareness about it. Awareness to yourself on what is the time that you give social media. Probably something that we can talk about as designers, and I would love for you to comment on that, Yash, or anyone from the audience, is if you're a designer and you are using a dark pattern, is there something that you can do in terms of still give the freedom to the user to limit the time or limit the proportion or the effort or engagement, the user still has a choice. So maybe solutions in terms of, Yash, any comments?
I think,
for example,
go on.
For example, like Instagram, you can set your limit. Your phones have, you have your work-life balance. You can choose what apps will give you notifications. So maybe can you add to that, maybe along the same lines or something completely different, anything else?
Yeah, it's easy to be very skeptical of, big corporations, big companies. But the fact is, they are having these same conversations within also, like these companies. When smartphone addiction, the awareness got raised about it. And naturally, Google, like at least in Android, iOS, they started having these timers, allowing users to set time limits, or like notifications, even if something like, don't raise your volume too high. So this is something which is being baked into the products. But see, when these are like big, massive companies, change takes time. It's a very competitive environment. So this will slowly get incorporated into it. But if you are, it's like you can be unconsciously using dark patterns, but but if you know that you are using it, then from my point of view, the ethics are very clear. I mean, if you choose to do it, that is also fine. But if you are aware of it and you have to take a stand one way or another, that is this a big enough issue where I should make a stand on it, versus it's a minor thing. At this point, I don't want to get too much involved into the different aspects, the other aspects of it. So that is something you can do. But you can fool others, but you can't fool yourself. If you know, you know.
So Yash, you are someone who actually limits your social media use, right? Like, can you comment on that probably? Like, personally, as someone who practices that.
When I realized about these, what they are doing to like get us to get hooked to these products, for example, the notifications, the recurring, the intermittent reinforcement schedules they're using. So at that point, at certain point, it just, no one likes being manipulated. So when you are aware of it and when you realize the extent of it or the way it is done, and at the same time, you also have to understand where you are. Is that if I spend 1 hour on Instagram today, it's fine, it's only 1 hour. But is there any lasting benefit of it to me? 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, do I remember who all has commented on my XYZ post, or who has liked my post, or how many likes? Will it be important 5 years down the line? Will it be important 10 years down the line? Will these products or services even exist 10 years down the line? So these are all things that it will not come to you all at once, but something that you are aware of, and you have to understand, does using this product or service help you meet your goals in life, what your goals are? And if not, then it's a simple choice to let go of them. And I mean, you can still use but you should not let these products and services or your devices, your smartphone use you. You should use them. And to use them, you can like set up appropriate rules. You can set up, and you can see, here's the crazy part is, when you talk about behavioral design, you can also apply those principles on yourself. You can also shape your environment and everything to trigger certain behaviors and habits in yourself. So the best part of learning this behavioral science, psychology, is you are not immune to these things. You can use the exact same techniques on yourself to drive better outcomes and better behaviors for yourself. And that is how, that is the reason I ended up over time. And I did not just one day decide not to use Facebook, not to use Instagram. Over 3, 4, 5 years, slowly just the fascination stopped. And I realized that the value I was getting was not meeting my personal goals in life. And slowly it just dropped off to the point that it's not even on my radar.
Thank you, Yash, for all those, for us to think about, to reflect on what is the time that we, how it is affecting our lives in terms of relationships, in terms of time that we actually spend to grow as individuals. How much time do you spend learning a course against how much time do you spend mindlessly scrolling? How much time do you spend talking to people inside the house, to, probably chatting to people who you hardly know or who are across the world, and it doesn't really matter to interact with them or no. So yeah, that's the flex culture is also a good topic. Thank you, Yadu, to talk about it, to read, to educate ourselves more about this topic. And yes, Mitra has a question: how do you distinguish between good or bad, for the user when our final goal is to work for the client? I think this is different versions of the same topic. Anything to comment?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The rule of thumb you can use is what I spoke about in the ethics of it. First one is the golden rule. Would you like it if someone did it to you? If not, then don't do it. And second thing is, are we taking advantage of the user's ignorance or lack of sophistication to trick them into taking certain actions? If they were mature enough, if they were educated, smart, if they were sophisticated enough, they had all the information to make that choice, would they still make the same choice? If not, then yes, you are in that gray zone.
Yeah, thank you, Yash. And yeah, Daniel says, I believe instead of stopping usage of social media, maybe it's time to learn and unlearn the way you use it and learn new ways on how you can use these platforms differently, consciously, and I would add to that, effectively. Maybe you're a content creator, maybe you're an artist, maybe this design, maybe it's to create career opportunities for yourself, or just create awareness among designers on topics as such, talking about dark patterns in a dark pattern. So probably those are things that we can think about, but creating a discipline for yourself is also something that we really need to work on as designers, as users. So is there anything else? Yes, probably a message. Okay, if we want to start a career in behavioral design, any advice for, we have a lot of newcomers, freshers?
I would say the list of reading resources, the books I recommended is a solid resource. I mean, that is like a 1-year course in itself, like just going through those books and understanding and integrating those things into your practice. So that is the easiest way to do it. And the second thing is, there are just certain websites, and there is Nereal is one, the popular ones who talk about behavioral design. They have courses on this also. And something which is now coming up on the forefront, because it was on the back burner for the last 4-5 years. Now it is starting to accelerate. So I assume the number of courses related to this will also start coming up a lot more. I think Interaction Design Foundation also has at least some sessions related to it. And I think Udemy, it's just, but the easiest way to do it is to read those books, honestly. And I would recommend reading books rather than Googling and reading blog posts, is because the books will give you this information in a structured manner. Because the field is very vast, there is a lot of confusion, lot of differing terms, lot of different. So the structure will become you will not realize it, but the structure that is given in specific resources like books and courses, that will become much more valuable as you start to go deeper and deeper into the topic.
Yeah, especially when we are winding down for the day, and instead of picking up your phone, maybe it's time to put it away and pick up these books and rewire your brain. And instead of starting our day, because starting your day with the phone can actually rewire the way your brain and the way you behave, rather than using it during the day, but the first thing in the morning and just before you go to sleep. Are probably habits that we can think about breaking and turn to books and take away our eyes away from the screens to lighter versions that and there is a different way that you use your brain, right, while you're reading and consuming content that is not on a screen that's damaging your eyes. So thank you so much, Yash. You have any closing comments?
No, I had a great time. Especially, I didn't realize there would be so much interest because people asked really, really good questions. It led, like, I also had to think a fair bit about these topics, and I think we can maybe have further conversations on this.
Yeah, so thank you. So we have a comment which I will probably, respond to. Thank you, Daniel, for asking. He was asking whether, IDF is said to be theoretical instead of hands-on. Could you briefly clarify if that is the case? Yes, it is, because it's more important to build the basics and your foundations on the concepts based on very many years of practices that did not work and theories that establish the foundations of UX. If you were to update yourself, or if we had courses on interaction design foundation or any courses which actually just talk about new patterns and new case studies on the new approaches to UX, you would only be updating yourself, but getting your basics right. And then you can probably update yourself on your own. You don't need to do these courses to just stay updated. So getting that foundation really in and having a structured approach. And what IDF does is it has a combination of written content and videos with short quizzes. So the way your brain works is it's kept active because you are consuming content on video, which is something that we are addicted to. Then you're reading. So there is another way that you're reading the words, and the way that it gets into your mind or you're consuming or learning is different. And when you're doing a quiz shortly after consuming that content and learning, you're using or accessing different parts of your brain to actually, and this helps you get your foundations really in. So the structure approach that IDF follows is this. So it is more theoretical, and they're talking about basic concepts, and they're adding on content, because of all the changes that have come. But they don't go by, okay, this is the latest thing. These are the companies that are doing well, because that's something that we can always do on. So that approach works. So I think I'm going to stop now because we've gone over for 15 minutes, and we decided to extend the session only because the topic, especially when it came to dark patterns, is something that affects our lives on a daily basis. And probably it's time to think about the users as well as us as designers, what we can do to maybe reduce or stop or talk about these patterns and these unethical practices. So thank you, Yash, mainly for choosing this topic, not just talking to us about it. And this is probably his way of creating an awareness. Thank you to all the participants who kept this Q&A very, very interesting and active. I'd like to thank everyone who took their valuable time from a busy day to attend this webinar. And to all the participants, especially to Daniel, who kept our chat window buzzing. I hope next time you will unmute and probably also interact with us. Thank you, Yadu, for adding your thoughts to us to this session. And thank you, Arya, Mitra, Nikhil, and everyone else who expressed how much they enjoyed the session, we gained out of it. Thank you to all the volunteers of the IxDF Kerala team that worked behind the scenes to make this event happen. We've only touched upon this topic of persuasive design to guide user experience. Please write to us and let us know how you found the session. So we have our social media handles. We're available on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Clubhouse @IxDF Kerala. You can also write to us at idfkerala@hotmail.com. We have an exclusive IxDF Kerala community on Interaction Design Foundation, their website. And we'll probably come up with another session in 2 weeks. And until then, stay safe and stay connected. Thank you.